Bigger than capes.
Give me some outside.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello, welcome to Bigger Than Capes. I'm Zach, and this week I'm joined by Angela. What's up? How you doing? Why am I talking like this?
I don't know. I'm fine, dude. Yes.
Was all really weird. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's just go with it.
Yeah.
Here we are, and
yes, discussing things.
Yes. This week we're going to be discussing one of our top books of 2021. Declan Shalvey, Rory McConville, Joe Palmer, Chris O'Halloran and Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou's Time Before Time.
Yes. And not Time After Time, as I keep thinking of it in my head.
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
Our recent research has shown that there's quite a few time travel stories already using the Time After Time moniker. Yeah. I guess that's part of the thing here. Also, I guess Time Before Time gives you that, it's not what you're expecting. You're expecting Time After Time. So
yeah, but it's the time before time. It's
that's
time
right.
Before time. Yeah.
So before we dive into this one, I was gonna try and have a weird conversation of our history with time travel, and
yes.
No, that sounds like we have time. Our history with time travel stories.
We've not literally been pinging back and forth through time.
I mean, speak for yourself.
Fair enough.
So, I guess I'm quite into time travel stories. I know you are as well.
Yeah.
So the question becomes then, why?
Because time is an artificial construct created by mankind in order to make sense of the linear existence in which we live. And it's kind of fun to play around with that concept.
Yeah, all right.
It's, it's kind of interesting sort of, what if? And we've all had those moments where something's happened and we've gone, God, if only I'd have done this before, or if only I could go back and change this. Or if only I could go forward and see how this turns out. And it's just a very persuasive concept that it's kind of fun to see, well, all the possibilities of being able to go forward or backward in time. And I mean, physicists have basically said you can probably go forward in time, but you'll probably never be able to go backward. To which I say, you've clearly not read H.G. Wells.
That's right. Easier to go back than it is forward, apparently.
Yeah. But there you are. So yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's like the ultimate what if.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that. Follow-up question then. What was the first time travel story, film, TV show, audiobook that
We didn't have audiobooks, we call them records. Although I did have several things that could be classified as audiobooks, but they were in records. Anyway, probably reading the book Tom's Midnight Garden as a 7-year-old. And that's a very basic time travel thing in that at midnight, the clock strikes and Tom goes downstairs and he ends up in the Edwardian period and has numerous adventures. And it's the kind of time travel story that you don't realise is a time travel story until you get to the end of the book and the little girl he played with is the old woman who lives upstairs kind of thing. And it's like, ooh. So all along he was actually going back in time. That was probably the first time travel-y thing. That and Star Trek The Voyage Home. The one with the whales, where they go back in time to the 80s.
The one with the whales.
The one with the whales, and they have to save planet Earth from a marbled cylinder with a ball of light dangling off the end. So they decide to go back in time to the 1980s and rescue some humpback whales who can speak to the aliens and plead the case and please don't destroy the planet.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like the voyage home was made, I don't know, like near the 1980s, if not in the 1980s, and it was incredibly convenient to travel there.
Yes. And also there's that classic bit where they arrest Chekhov because he's asking where all the nuclear vessels are, which is just... As a child, that went pretty much over my head because by the
as
time
an adult...
as an adult, I was like, yeah, that was quite amusing. Thank you very much. So, that was probably the earliest. And if you're counting Flight of the Navigator, because he ends up 8 years in the future, that was also one of my early experiences with time travel. What about you, Zach? What was your earliest time travel-y experience?
Sorry, was Undiscovered Country really 1991?
I'm afraid it was, yes.
God, it feels like it must be older than that. I guess that's in keeping with my understanding of time travel. Yeah. I don't know what that meant. For me, I think the first thing was probably... so when I was a child, was that fallow period of Doctor Who between
89 and the movie in 96 and then the actual proper 2005.
Yeah, so we didn't really have that much Doctor Who, but for some reason I seem to see a lot of the old Doctor Who. So in no particular order, though, and with no real grasp of what was actually going on, which is very much just like watching Doctor Who in order.
Yeah.
Especially before, like, 2005 onwards, we have, like, series arcing narratives and...
Yeah.
I'm not sure we ever really got that prior to that. Everything was kind of one and done, maybe a two-parter here and there.
Except Trial of a Time Lord, which went on for far too bloody long. Colin Baker. Moving on.
There's only one Baker. That's, yes, we'll get into that a different time. So I think early Doctor Who, and then I never thought of it as a time travel film at the time, but I was really into that, like, 1997 Lost in Space.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, I guess I never realized that they just keep jumping through time at one point, don't they? Because they see the ship as if it had been crashed on the planet for years. We have Dr. Zachary Smith as a, like, 12-foot tall spider monster. Oh, the pain. Still good, right? I've not seen it in about 15 years. How badly can it have aged, really?
I mean, it'll still hold up. I mean, a lot of films from the 90s hold up, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It'll be fine.
Gary Oldman's great in it, from what I recall.
I think Gary Oldman's great in most things, to be fair.
True.
I think it is, though, Matt LeBlanc's greatest work.
It's the first role he played that wasn't Joey, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
He has that cool armor that's like, I don't know, like a shutter on the front of a shop.
That that sort of, goes away and around. Yeah. Works well.
Following that, stuff like Back to the Future, I know I watched endlessly as a kid and also as an adult. And of course, Bill and Ted.
And their excellent adventures.
You could say an occasional Bogus Journeys. Although, do they time travel in Bogus Journey?
I can't remember if they time travel in Bogus Journeys.
I guess they do. They at least go forward because they get station. And
yes, they do. I never enjoyed it as much as Excellent Adventures. I think the problem is you make a film as good as that, it's very difficult to do a sequel.
It's a challenge, yeah. I've still not seen the third one, but
Nor have I.
I think the first was a particular high, so following it was harder. So I think that gives a little bit of a
that's a little bit of
a flavour of our time travel interest. You got anything more recent that you want to shout out?
I mean, I'm mostly stuck in the 90s.
Yeah, there is that.
Crime Traveller, which no one's heard of but me.
Go
back in time, solve crime.
If it wasn't for the IMDb page, I'd be sure you'd made it up.
A lot of people think that. Quantum Leap, which is again early 90s and is it's more of a social commentary than time travel.
It can be both.
It can be both. I mean, I'm trying to think can we count? I mean, it's 2009. Can we count the first of the Abrams Star Trek films? Because technically Nero goes back in time and Kirk's dad ends up dying. I might be pushing that one, I feel
like you're pushing it, but
I'm really pushing that.
I'll kind of allow it.
Looper. Let's go with Looper, because that's a thing.
Looper is a good shout, and I also feel like Looper has some common DNA with Time Before Time. That's
partly why I picked it out of this list that I'm currently looking at, going, oh yeah, I enjoyed that, and oh yeah, that was terrible. There's more terribles. There's not a lot of good. Time travel's hard to do well. It's quite easy to just throw it in there as a concept, but it's difficult to do something new with it, which is
definitely difficult. I think whilst there's been a lot of time travel stories, I think we do get stuck on the good guy goes back to try and improve the present by changing the past. Or the opposite, the bad guy tries to travel back in time to make things worse.
And then the good guy has to follow the bad guy to fix the timeline.
Yeah, like talked about it last year. What was it? Yes. Gonna get there. Ivar.
That's the one. There you go. Let's kill Hitler, but not.
Yeah, let's kill Hitler, but not. Ivar Time Walker kind of deals with the idea of, why people can't succeed in going back in time to kill Hitler, because everyone stood around arguing about who gets to kill Hitler. And I think comics don't do time travel as frequently as you might expect, if that makes sense.
They definitely don't, because I was trying to think of recent comics that involve time travel, and I'm really struggling.
So, Ivar, but that's
aside
like
from
5 years ago.
Yeah.
You got things like Squirrel Girl. She did some time traveling.
Yeah, she did some time travel. She did some interdimensional travel. She did some space travel. She's done all the travels.
And is Exiles time travel or just like?
I feel like that's more interdimensional, but I could be wrong.
Kang is definitely involved sometimes.
He is. But yeah, the upshot is that there's been it's kind of weird that a concept that's so common in science fiction, in film and television and other medias doesn't really crop up as much in comic books as one might expect.
It's interesting, especially in stuff like if we look at Image Comics, the last time travel book I can really think of is Paper Girls, which has been a good few years now, and whilst really good, is completely different to Time Before Time. And I guess that's part of the reason we don't have that many time travel stories, is you have to do something that is distinctly different from what else is happening.
Yeah.
Paper Girls, I think, did that, and like the space between Paper Girls and like Ivar Time Walker or Squirrel Girl is pretty massive.
Yep, it is.
And Time Before Time kind of takes some of those elements from Looper, so the crime elements, the kind of reflection of a future not so distant from our own.
Yeah.
Ideas like that, which we see in Looper, we also see in Time Before Time. And I think, whilst they're not that similar in actual storytelling, I feel like there's a similar feel to the overall world being built.
Yes.
I think we see here in Time Before Time that really get to in time travel. Like, here we deal with the idea of kind of different organized crime rackets running periods of time.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone do. I mean, okay, we kind of get in Paper Girls that in the future, you know, there's a group that run the world. And I mean, we get that in a lot of time travel stories, but I don't think it's ever having it that the only people who can time travel are criminals is kind of weird and kind of different. I guess we should probably like do the premise of the book.
We should, we could do that.
We've done that classic us thing of
diving in before explaining the concept.
Would you like to take this, or would you like me to see what I can do?
I mean, I can basically read the blurb off the back.
I mean, if that's the way you want to do this. And then we can
expand upon it. So, in 2140, to escape a world with no future, many turn to the Syndicate, a criminal organisation that, for the right price, will smuggle you back in time to the promise of a better yesterday. Tatsuo, a Syndicate smuggler, wants to leave his life of crime behind, but when an FBI agent, I'm going to name her, she's called Nadia, disrupts his escape plan, they both find themselves hunted across time by his former employers. To me, that doesn't really do it a great deal of justice, because there's a whole subplot as to why Tatsuo wants to escape Syndicate, why Nadia wants to get revenge on the Syndicate, and also the fact that they end up with the Union, who are the Syndicate's arch rivals, and the Union control one period of time, and they find themselves caught in the middle of the Syndicate and the Union, all while trying to work out what their next move is going to be.
There's some argument, Angela, that if you put all that in the blurb...
Do you think that might take away from the back and we won't be able to have, you know, quotes from people like Jonathan Hickman and Charles Soule and comicbook.com? That
also, that you got to read the book, Angela. I mean,
okay, there is that. Yeah,
you got to sell the book to somebody.
Okay, I mean, it was sold to me based on purely the letterer, so that was fine.
Yeah, I worry about you sometimes.
Yeah, I worry about me too.
To be fair, Hassan's lettering is pretty great so far.
Yeah.
So there will be spoilers, I think.
Yeah, you can't discuss this without hitting spoilers.
Which actually leads on to one of my favourite things in this, is that there is a point where Tatsuo says to Nadia that the Union don't like spoilers.
Yes.
So unless they ask, don't tell them anything, which in itself, because her response is, but they have time machines. But there is a beauty to that as a detail, I like it a lot. I think this is a book with a lot of great detail. I think there's a lot of little moments that kind of build a bigger world quite smoothly. And
yeah, because I mean, it's quite, time travel as a concept can be quite, what are the rules, what do you do, what's all this, and it's all really organically explained. Like, there's just, like I say, it's little moments. There is exposition, but you don't need like masses of exposition to actually understand what's going on, which is a sign that the world and the concept's really simple enough, at least, to understand without needing all of that.
Mm.
And it just means that you don't have to worry with too much long exposition. You can just get to the core of the story and the plot.
Yeah, very much so. I think, yeah, the exposition we do get is kind of casually slipped in between other things. I think the world is built quite nicely between issues. I don't think... It doesn't feel like there's an issue spent setting up the world. It feels like we get quite a lot of character work in the first issue, and that I think the character work continues, as does the world building throughout.
Yeah.
There's some little details that I find really interesting, like everyone's trying to buy their way to the past to get out of 2141.
Yeah.
Because there's no future. However, we see the future. So
yeah,
there's an interesting depth to it of everyone trying to flee to the past because things will be better in the past, even though the future doesn't look great, but the future's there and established, and it's known that 1,000 years from this, there's still a future, which maybe I'm adding a lot to this, but I don't know if it's a commentary on the way people are.
I mean, it certainly feels like that, because particularly at the moment, nostalgia is big business. Everyone wants to go back to, and I get why, because, you know, the last 5, 7, 10 years have not been fun. You know, politically, there's been a pandemic, bad stuff's happened, and I get why people want to go back to sort of a more golden era. Like, there's a lot of 1980s nostalgia going on, but I'm thinking, yeah, but we didn't have the internet in our houses. Mobile phones were the preserve of the... I mean, I love that that's even brought up in, like, the very first few pages where this young lad is sent back to 1987 and is horrified that there's, like, no Wi-Fi. And that just... And I think that is a good point, is like, yeah, you could go back to an era and you can get all nostalgic about, you know, the 70s when there were power cuts and rubbish piling in the streets and life was pretty terrible for people generally. But people don't see that. They go, yeah, but look at all the media that came out in the 1970s. That was really cool. And they're like, yeah, but also it was terrible for people. And I think that there is a certain commentary about, we think of the past as this, you know, great era where things were a lot simpler and life was just shittier in a different way.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to smooth over the glaring negatives in the eye of nostalgia. And I think that's very clearly featured in this, that running to 1987, running to 2042 might be better than where you are now, but it's probably bad in its own ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's something they do a good job of portraying, that no matter what time period we see Tatsuo in, it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anywhere we see in this that looks great. There's a good, which also ties in like the depiction of different time periods, the kind of subtle changes in colouring and things like that. Really, I think that there's casual, or maybe it's more subtle than casual, changes in kind of clothing design and the architecture of things, which show different time periods. But I think there's also a good effort to show that things don't change. To show that things don't change that much. Like, we see, I don't know, 2093 or something like that, and it's not wildly different from now, which is probably more accurate than we might want to admit. I think we see in a lot of time travel a wildly different future, like a few years away. Like,
yeah, hover cars. I mean, there's Back to the Future is a perfect example because, 2015 we'll have hover cars and fax machines in our houses, which was such a 1980s concept. And in reality, it's not. And we are now further from 1985 than Marty was when he was in 1985 to 1955. So we don't, hoverboards don't exist. We don't all wear shiny caps. And you think, yeah, I get why you did that filmically, but also that's not how the world evolves.
But technically, the architecture between 1985 and 2015 in Back to the Future doesn't change that much.
Yeah, which is one of the few good things.
It's almost like there's only so much you could do with the Universal Studios backlot.
It's almost like there's a budget involved, yeah. But yeah, that, like I said, that's what I like. It's different enough to go, oh yeah, that isn't today, but it's the near future.
And I think even when we see, 2000, over 1,000 years from now in 3455, man, I'm just throwing years at you right now.
Yeah, there's some years going on.
I kind of feel like we still see a recognizable future. It's not this completely distorted utopia that I think we get used to seeing people go 1,000 years into the future and everything's weirdly rounded off and kind of pointy at the top and
white and
there's water everywhere and really well trimmed trees and such.
And box hedges.
Yeah. Here it's kind of nice that we see that no matter when it is, it's chaos.
Yeah.
And it's not any cleaner or nicer or better organized. And people are still just about managing to survive.
Yeah.
One of the things that kind of bookends this is, which we see in 2141 and 3455, I think, is kind of Oscar and Tatsuo's friendship.
Oscar, yeah.
Which is devastating, so thanks for that, guys. But
yeah. Oh God, Oscar.
Which is interesting because it's one of the few parts of the plot that takes place without Nadia is the opening issue where we basically see that Oscar is sent to 3455 to collect a parcel, which he fails to do so because he's arrested, and a lot of bad things happen, and he's basically trapped there for, if my maths are correct, 34 years.
Yeah.
Which is a long time, and he is definitely worse for wear when he comes back.
He's very much, I mean, he's completely broken.
And you kind of feel like at that point that's the last we're going to see of Oscar. And we are kind of treated to this build up to that where as friends, they're both kind of planning to get out. They're going to steal a pod, go to a better time period, run away from it all, because they realize they're never going to get out by working off their debt to the syndicate.
Yeah, because the debt to the syndicate is basically it's a con, basically.
It never ends, and there's constantly less pods, and there's constantly more to pay for. So the syndicate is forever. But that contrast where at the end we see Oscar again.
Yeah.
I think he's utterly heartbreaking, and yet possibly the best the best thing in this in a way. It's it kind of presents us with a world where even characters that we don't think we're going to ever see again can still appear because these people are going to end up going to the same places. And I think that's something we avoid in time travel because it gets so complicated. I think a lot of time travel stories tiptoe around the idea that what if these characters meet in different orders? And I know Doctor Who, River Song, whatever, or the Valiant equivalent with Neela Sethi and Ivar, and things never happen in the right order. The idea that while Tat's best friend Oscar isn't there through this story with him, another version of Oscar can be, and it kind of opens up the possibilities of how characters can interact with one another and how the universe can fold back on itself throughout the storytelling being done across time periods, which kind of means that, I don't know, the family from 1987 or the serial killer in 1963, whilst seeming like throwaway bits of world building, can come back to matter.
They're not throwaway bits. Can confirm all that you have seen is going to be important. Like, no one is completely gone off the stage with this. They're just waiting in the wings. So, yeah, there is some stuff that happens here that I have only just in the last issue gone, oh my goodness, so that's that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's, like I said, that's one of the real strengths, is that no one's ever really gone, because there's always another time period they can crop up in.
Which in itself is one of the things that I know frustrates people about time travel stories. But when it's done well and when you're along with it, is great.
Yeah.
And I know we've seen, there's classic examples of stuff like Endgame or Back to the Future 2, where people get really frustrated because, or Tenet is a good example, where people can't keep up with what's going on, so they get really annoyed about it and decide it's not good. And it's like, no, it's confusing. Don't get me wrong. I think we've all done the thing where we map out just how many time periods and how many timelines there are in Back to the Future 2. It's too many. But it shows a great consideration for what you can only do that with time travel. Or, you know, dimension hopping. You can do this whole complicated, multi-tiered, everything happening at once but all over the place kind of thing. And I think when it's done well, it's kind of the best. And I'll admit, and we've touched on this in previous episodes, that part of this is us being, you know, raised on 90s TV, where everything was time loops, dimension hopping, dinosaurs and robots.
All the good things in life.
So I think now we're probably more game for a book like this than some people will be. But it's good. It's good. I don't know how to say that and not sound like an idiot, but
it's so really good. It's so good. I mean, it's got really clever world building. It's got really strong characterization, which I think is one of its real strengths, because often in time travel, if you're not careful, the whole concept of time travel kind of runs roughshod over characterization. Back to the Future 2. Sorry. Just to bring that up again.
It's fair. It's true.
But here, it's like, it's all completely integral. Like, the characterization grows through the time travel and the concept, and vice versa, and it's just really, really well done. And it's really impressive that it manages to balance that out. And the art works really well. It just fits the tone and the characterization and even, you know, the concept. And it's just really good, isn't it? Yeah, it's It's a really strong book, and I think it's one of the best uses of time travel I've seen since, they had to go back and save some whales.
I agree, and I think it's more than time travel being a plot device or a piece of a grander puzzle. I think we see time travel in this as a part of the syndicate's life, and the anti-radiation pills everyone's taking, and Tat throws up pretty aggressively from time travel.
That is a very impressive bit of art. Never has Bath looked so, disgusting, and yet also in keeping with a concept.
Most definitely. It
is a sight to behold.
It really is, which is a good thing and a bad thing, yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's also nice to see time travel when it's not attractive and not perfect. The fact that the pods, some are bad and some are way worse.
Some are basically a cage with a dial on.
Yeah, and it doesn't look pleasant. It's not turned time travel into this, sleek, sexy, appealing thing. It's made that time travel sucks, and that's kind of works in the context of this. I think the idea that it's not a good time and it's expensive and it's hard and it's radiation poisoning and it's throwing up as soon as you arrive. And
it's run by criminals. It's not a pleasant experience, and it's not a pleasant concept.
Yes, and we talked earlier about rules, and we are basically told that there are rules and that it's impossible to change what's already happened. But everything's already happened. This is we kind of see used as a bargaining tool. That I know that before this date in 2141, there wasn't an attack on the syndicate, but after that date, even though we know that in 2093, the Union don't want to hear any spoilers, which means from their point of view, anything can happen, which is this rolling thing that anytime we're told it's impossible, nothing can change, they're also then constantly changing. So it's an interesting, complicated thing. We're also told by Oscar that they could create a paradox. So it begs a lot of questions. And I think the more you try and iron out the rules of time travel for stories, the harder it gets. And it can get in the way of telling a good story. But I think here, time travel is treated as if it's something that's fully understood, but I don't think that's true.
Yeah, it's like there are these rules, but if there were these rules, then you would know this, but you don't know this. So what's
so
going on?
Are there any rules?
So are there any rules? What's going on, guys? Like, is there a predestined end to this that someone in, 3455 has already seen and is already aware of? And
is it the robot?
Is it Kevin,
I can't remember his name. Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, Kevin.
It's not said in this, and I know it's said in future issues.
Yeah, said in future issues is Kevin, which is the best name for a robot.
And I was sure it couldn't be Kevin because the robots some of the robots in Final Space are called Kevin, and I was determined that it couldn't still be Kevin. But of course, it can be.
It is. And I mean, this is just the first volume. The second volume will be out sometime soon, I assume.
We must be close to the end of the second arc.
We are close. Right? I think the second arc actually finishes in issue 12. It's quite a lot. The second arc is quite a long one.
Yes.
Because we do have like the one shot.
Which is issue 6.
Yes. Which is flipping heartbreaking and really pushes the whole concept because it's from the point of view of the people who were relocated rather than the syndicate or the union. It's just the ordinary people who've been relocated to the past, and it's just absolutely tragic. It's just heartbreaking. It's really good, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
But absolutely heartbreaking. And then we start picking up the second arc, which has got sort of different threads to it. Nadia's lost family is sort of the focus, but then Tat's got his own little side quest, one might say. But it is the kind of book that it does get better. It sounds ridiculous to say it gets better every issue. Maybe it doesn't get huge leaps and bounds, but it just feels like a book that starts off really good and then it just becomes even better. And it is really, I'm really looking forward to seeing where the end of the second arc ends. I hope we get a third arc, because I think as well it's got quite a lot of mileage in it as a concept.
I agree. I think every issue has been great so far, and this is one of those books where I didn't know if it was going to be a one volume and done or an ongoing, or I think the last couple of Declan Shalvey books, Savage Town and Bog Bodies, were both like a one and done kind of story. Yeah. So I was surprised when this was an ongoing, but I think it really suits it. I think the longer you can keep this going, the more layers you can add, the more and the more rewarding it can be to read through. I read all this in singles and then rereading as a trade. There's so much that you forget, I think.
Oh yeah.
It benefits from being reread. I think it benefits from reading it in different formats as well. It's interesting because when you reviewed most of this, all of this.
I have reviewed all of this, yes.
For the website, and on the first issue review, I wasn't sure you were into this, but here we are.
And here we are, and it's one of my favourite books. No, it wasn't. It's kind of interesting because I read it, and then I wrote the review, which I've learnt now. I need to read things at least twice before I actually write a review. Because I read it, I wrote the review, and then I went back and read it again, and I was like, actually,
yeah,
this is better than I gave it credit for. I can't remember what else I was reading that week. Maybe it got lost in the melee, but I only read it once. And then when I read it again, I was like, actually, this is a lot better than what I put in the review. And then by the third issue, I was like, I am totally sold. Give me more tomorrow, please. Yes.
Which is fair. I think this is what, the third time we've talked about this. We've mentioned it in our Best of 2021 article and podcast.
Or Best of 2021. God, we're in 2022.
Yeah,
time is a concept. Jesus.
Slipping away.
Yeah.
I don't know what my point was going to be.
We mentioned it in those things.
Yes, we've talked about it quite a lot, and I think with good reason. This is one of those comics that I think if you're into sci-fi, you're going to be into this, and if you're into time travel, definitely. Even if you're not into time travel, I think there's so many other things. There's some real genuine emotion, and it's kind of a gritty crime story with legit emotions and also time travel, and it's hard to know who wouldn't be into it. I think nothing is for everyone. I get that. A lot of people would be into this. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes and how it gets there. I think it still feels like, I think the problem with any book of this nature is it's kind of hard to conclusively talk about it, because who the hell knows where it's going to go.
It continually surprises me, because there's stuff coming out now that I think, I did not see that coming. I did not think we were going to go there. I'm glad we are, because I like when things aren't predictable. And this is very unpredictable, but in a really good way. And
I feel like we've got a multitude of not even necessarily villains, but like antagonists.
Yeah.
Helgi is obviously
yeah,
right up there, but then we've got Karina from the Union, who seems almost more sinister than Helgi at times.
In a way. And you've got Madeline, the double agent.
Yes, the double agent.
Spoilers.
Yes. I mean, we said there were going to be spoilers. It's hard to avoid.
It's hard to avoid spoilers.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of different antagonists and in quite quick succession, which is...
Yeah, because you think Helgi's going to be the bad guy. And certainly when I read the first issue, I thought, oh yeah, Helgi's going to be the bad guy. And it turns out there are lots of people who are actually the antagonists of this. It's not just Helgi. There's a lot of people.
And I think that, well, I guess that's kind of the nature of being told that all of these, almost all the characters we have are, organized crime rings. And
yeah.
It should make sense. It should be expected that they're not all going to be great people, but it's still a surprise.
That they're all really bad people.
But I guess it also gives potential for people to come good. I mean, I still think there's characters that we kind of see both sides of with, Fang, Merv.
Yeah. There are. I'm gonna spoil some later issues because there is hints in later issues of some of the syndicate, maybe, possibly. We'll see what they do, but yeah, maybe having second thoughts or at least pondering what's going on.
It's good to know,
Is it Wells? Yeah, watch out for Wells. That's all I'm gonna say.
I thought Nadia was Wells.
Oh, yeah. No, Nadia is Wells. Who is Wells? Fang. I'm thinking of Fang, aren't I?
Okay.
I'm thinking of Fang. Yes.
But I don't know. I think for a first volume as well, we do get a lot of characters with what we've got. These just the ones I remember to write down. We have Tatsuo, Oscar, Merv, Helgi, Fang, Nadia. We find out her parents are John and Alice.
Yeah.
Karina, Gabriella, Gare, Moose, Rosalind / Madeline.
Rosalind, yeah.
That's a lot of characters. That's like
10
plus characters in 5 issues that largely are recurring.
Yeah. And none of them... It doesn't feel like any of them are just like, oh, here's just a random named character. They all do things.
Yes, and they're all distinctive. You can tell them all apart immediately. I think we often have a thing with kind of like Gare and Moose are just kind of bodies in the Union, and yet whilst somewhat reminding me of like a time travel equivalent of Bulk and Skull, are immediately recognizable as their own thing, not just generic henchmen. Which is good, and I think it speaks a lot of Joe Palmer's art that everyone looks different.
Yeah, and everyone's distinctive.
Also, things we should mention in regards to art. The detail that everybody who time travels has little black dots all over them.
Yep. Yeah.
Which I think is something you don't get on the first read, but...
No, it took me a few, and I was like, oh, yeah.
It's a nice detail to kind of differentiate that, Nadia's travelled in time like once, twice maybe, and she's fine, but the syndicate and union members who travel more so have become like marked by it, which is something we see that it's a rough ride through time.
There are physical effects to the time travel.
I think it's a good detail to show that there is something seemingly permanent that comes from To also, because, you know, I may as well give you the platform. Hassan's lettering is
very, very good.
Pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very good.
Big fan of the giant numbers to start to like indicate time periods, especially the really glitchy one when we don't know what year they're in.
When they've just sort of stolen the time pod and it's all gone a bit wrong and they're just not sure where they are at all. Yeah.
So I feel like we've done that thing where we just say everything's great and we don't really have much.
Yeah.
Left.
It's all good work.
We've said it on previous episodes, but I think this has been a really good year for, well, the year just gone. 2021 was 2021
was a
year.
Really, yeah, it was.
For comics. I mean,
yeah.
You know, personally and globally, it's been a nightmare. But in a purely comic book world,
been very good.
Yeah, I think Image in particular have had a really good year. And
they have.
Not to discredit anyone else, I think it's hard to find a comic book company focused largely on indie comics, but it's hard to find an indie comic company that hasn't had a pretty great year of books.
Yeah, there's been some really strong. I think most companies have at least put out one or more really good books.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where those books go in 2022 and also what new books come out of it. I hope we continue with as good a year for new comics.
Yes.
And I hope Time Before Time stays this good. I think it will.
I think it will. I have faith that it will continue to be. You know, if we do a best of 2022 list, it'll be on there probably if we can count it, even though it started in 2021.
I guess it's a bit of a judgment call as to how we break that up.
But
our list this year is very much focused on stuff that started in 2021. Yeah. But man, I cannot do years right now.
I don't think any of us. I think the concept of this being 2022 is just ridiculous.
Not a fan, if I'm honest.
No.
That is a lot of what I had to say. I think, as far as writing goes, Declan Shalvey and Rory McConville have just killed it with this. I think.
Yeah.
Joe Palmer's art and Chris O'Halloran's colouring, I think, really well complement each other. And from facial expressions to architecture to setting the mood of time periods with slight colour differences, I think they've nailed it. And I think Hassan's... I'll full name him, fine. Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou. It's just so many syllables.
It is.
I think it all ties together. And I know I've said this with so many books recently, but I think it's just a creative team working perfectly together and all bringing their absolute best to a comic.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything
else?
In conclusion, really good comic, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm looking forward to more of this a lot.
Yeah.
So
here's to more of that.
I think that might be us. I think
that might be us, yeah.
I think we can keep going, but it's largely going to be us just agreeing with each other.
Yeah, really good comic, yeah.
So yeah, more Time Before Time, please.
Yeah.
So we have been Angela and Zach, collectively Bigger Than Capes. And will continue to be. This has been bigger. Why do I keep saying Bigger Than Capes too many times? This has been Bigger Than Capes. And remember that comics are bigger than capes.